What's up, guys? We are back with another Super 7 Ultimates Power Rangers review, taking a look at the other villain, the other bad guy in this wave. We got Goldar, and Goldar needs some putties to go along with him too. So we're getting an army builder in Wave 1 with our putty patroller. Now, of course, he comes in standard Ultimate style packaging, so you've got a very small form factor, nothing like the T-Rex or Goldar, a more normal size box this time around with our slipcover. So you've got the sort of face plate for the putty there, the lightning burst, and then you've got the classic logo on the back of the slipcover. Pop that off, and we've got our very 90s inspired packaging there with the lightning bolts, the green color scheme, the figure there in the big window, and then on the back you've got a shot of the putty from the show, as well as a little bio for what these guys are. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our Ultimates Putty Patroller. You know, you can't have Rangers without some mindless minions and grunts to just be destroyed. And of course, that's what we get here. This is a really weird figure, though, because they decided to just throw, like, the kitchen sink at us when it comes to accessories. There is a lot of stuff to go through with this figure. And a lot of what they did is give us all of the goofy little, you know, disguises and get-ups and costumes that these things were shown in within the show, depending on, you know, what the monster of the week was. So let's get started, see what this guy can do, see how he moves around. He's very, very familiar, at least for me right now, because, you know, just recently doing the Green Ranger, it's basically the same figure. There's really not a whole lot different here. So we've got a head that can look up pretty decently. He can look down a little bit. No tilt, so you got full rotation. Arms out at the shoulders. They rotate. This is, when I say it's very familiar, this is literally the same body as Tommy because the arms come off just like Tommy does. So I'm assuming all of the male Rangers are going to be able to use the swappable limb system. We've got a bicep swivel. You've got your single jointed swiveling there, elbow. It's basically 90. Hinges, rotation at the wrist, normal stuff there. We've got the Tommy torso, of course, so you get the Tommy ab crunch and diaphragm articulation. So he's got really good back, pretty good forward, and this is your swivel point down here. So you have, again, a working ball peg waist, so tilt side to side. I still think this ab crunch is very unsightly. It is relatively functional compared to a lot of other figures in Ultimates in general, but it's still kind of a goofy cut. We've got legs that go out pretty much all the way. They kick forward only about that far, backwards a little bit. You got your thigh twist up there. Single jointed knees, of course, they go back basically 90 degrees. They are kind of tight for me though, so, you know, I guess maybe urge caution there. I don't feel like it's going to break, but it is tight. Boot cut down there, and then you've got your rocker, and you've got hinges down at those ankles. Pretty decent range there. So these guys are pretty solidly articulated. You know, like I mentioned, when it comes to Tommy, he's easily among one of the most articulated Ultimates in general, not just Power Rangers, but top to bottom Ultimates. The putty is basically the same thing, so you're going to get a little bit more range than you're used to when it comes to the majority of Ultimates. He is still, you know, encumbered by the fact that we're still doing single jointed limbs, but I think for the most part with how they design these figures, they went a little extra with these to make them as mobile as possible. What I really like about this figure is, well, before we get to the crazy accessories, is the visuals. And there's a couple reasons in particular, and we'll get to those. But at base level, a lot of what I like about this figure is the same things that I like about the Green Ranger, the Tommy figure, and it comes down to sizing and proportions. I know this is, of course, a larger top to bottom scale figure, but he's not a big bulky figure. He's a slender figure, which is very much in line with the source material from Sentai, and of course, you know, the majority of what we saw in Power Rangers. So it's a, you know, relatively tight figure. He looks kind of scrawny, and that's normal. I don't want a big muscly putty figure. The gray on the figure looks good. It's very consistent throughout, which sounds kind of like a weird thing to care about, but it is consistent. It is consistent from, you know, the suit aspect and then the belt to the boots. So you got that going on. We have these sort of rocky, craggy, you know, boulderish almost gloves and gauntlets that he has. A lot of wash in there, and it brings it out. Tons of sculpt in that, and all of that wash really helps to bring that out. We've got the belt with the, you know, the little 5-star emblem there. And then we've got the stripes on the chest, which are really clean, really crisp, no issues there. I do kind of wish that they extended to the back a little more, but I know that these kind of varied from putty to putty. They aren't exactly uniform, so it's not a big deal. I like the design that they went with, being very asymmetrical. And then my favorite aspect of this figure, though, you know, combined with the the coloration and the wash and the sculpt on these gauntlets is the head sculpt. This is a very, very like dirty Sentai looking head mask to me. The putties have various looks depending on what suit, what mask was being used. You know, there was an American mask, and then of course we've got Z putties as well. But this is very much like what I think of when I think of watching Jew Ranger, when I think of watching the Sentai, because this is exactly what they look like. Those deep, deep black kind of gouges in the face, the ultra frown that he's got there. This guy is just not happy to even exist. And then you've got those super, super red piercing eyes that add a nice pop of color in a very, not in a negative way, mundane looking figure, because he's just a big glob of gray. But I do like the head sculpt. I think it's really, really nicely done, sized really well. And overall, it's kind of a, don't take this the wrong way, it's kind of a boring figure, right? It's just a gray guy with some sort of rock hands, but it's exactly what it looks like. This is a putty. So I'm really happy with the way this guy turned out. I'm really, really happy to potentially get maybe too many of these. I don't know how hard I need to go on putties in this line, but as usual, I'll probably get at least a handful, and I'm really happy that it looks good enough that I do want to grab a few more, especially with that head and those hands. Now for some quick size comparisons, here we've got the Ultimates Green Ranger and Ultimates Goldar flanking our putty, and you can see that he stacks up pretty much exactly the same to the Ranger, maybe a little bit different just because Ranger has some slightly larger features, and of course the shield. Goldar, of course, looks much bigger, and I think that works really well from a, sort of boss perspective. Have Goldar with a squad of putties. It's going to look really good. Now, unfortunately, I have never been able to find all of my Lightning Collection putties after I moved, and I never really looked for them, so I don't have them to compare. But here is the Lightning Collection Green Ranger to give you an idea of what he's going to scale like next to Lightning Collection, and of course, way, way, way too big, so that's not going to work. And then let's move Goldar aside and do something entirely different. So here is a figure arts. There is the Superhero Piccolo. And then let's move this guy aside and do another 7-inch scale figure. So here is the NECA Warduke, and you can see that he's much, much bigger. And then just for fun, here is a vintage Power Rangers monster, so Suckadillo, which this actually works pretty well. And then for one actual putty comparison, here is the Super7 Reaction Putty. So, I mean, he's very much in line with the Rangers. So they're all going to scale really nicely with the Rangers between the putties, and then Goldar and, monsters down the road are going to be slightly bigger than the putty to make it look like, he fits in sort of like a minion or a grunt capacity next to something like this that's much, much bigger. Now, as far as accessories goes, the putty is loaded. And what Super7 did is kind of what Super7 does, where they decided to give us the weird stuff. Very much the stuff that you're not going to get elsewhere. So when it comes to putties, they very much changed a lot when it came to the Monster of the Week. So whatever that monster's theme was, you might have had some putties that also got changed up too. And that's what we get in this set. Now we do get a lot of normal stuff, and we're going to run through that first. We get a new head sculpt here, and this one is kind of more in line with like the US suit or the US mask. It's a little bit different. I mean, you can see it's actually quite a bit different. It's more rocky. It doesn't have the red eyes here either. Just entirely different look and feel. We get the Z putty getup as well, and this is where the ability to take the arms off really helps. You take the head off, you take the arms off, and then this sort of stretchy piece sits down over top. You also get the knee pads for this as well. These are kind of like rubber bands, or like big elastic bands, really. They're very, very snug, so I don't think they're ever going to go anywhere until you want to take them off. So you've got the things to change it up into be the Z putty. I don't think the Z putties had this belt, though, so that might be an inconsistency when you're trying to do this. We get a bunch of hands also. So we get a set of fists. So set of is, of course, 2, so you get a set of fists. You get a set of sort of open palmy style pose hands. We get a set of, this was a vertical hinged gripping hand, and then you get a set of laterally hinged gripping hands. We also get some of the putty weaponry. So we get like the blade here, and of course it's done up with that rocky, craggy texture, and it has all that black wash over top of the gray plastic. We also get the sort of club hand as well. This is very much in line with what we've seen, in Lightning Collection, so I'm glad they're kind of at least giving us the stuff that we got there, because I do really like these attachments. It makes the putties look at least somewhat menacing, maybe. And then we get all of the quote-unquote weird stuff, the monster of the week, the really specialized stuff. So you get one of the pumpkin heads. So this is just a, it's kind of a heavy pumpkin actually. It's just a big old pumpkin. Pop the head off, pop this on, and you've got like, one for the pumpkin wrapper. We get to the little clown neck piece thing. I don't know what you actually call this, but you've got a few layers of soft goods here. Take the head off and put this on underneath, and it sits on top of the neck. We get the cowboy getup, so you get the little kerchief, the little neck piece here, sits around the neck, and then you of course get a cowboy hat also, so you can pop on your putty. But the best, most ridiculous thing that we get, and I love it, and I hate how much I love it, is the football gear. So this is a football jersey, but it's really, really weird how they decided to do this. Or, well, smart, not just weird. So there is pads underneath. So you would actually take the head off and the arms off, pop this around, and then you can cinch it shut with this elastic band right here, and it'll keep it snug around the putty. So it gives him padding, so it makes him look a little bigger, beefier, and it gives you the shoulder pads, and then you drop this down over top, put the arms back on, and you've got yourself a fully suited up football putty, which I think is just ridiculous. The only downside to this is, I know I would never do it. I know there's no reason to ever do it, but having like a team of these on your shelf to me sounds cool and possibly insane, but the number is the same, so that's gonna maybe pose a little bit of a problem. But this guy comes with just a ton of accessories. There's so much weird stuff here, and it's very much in line with what we see with Ultimates, deep cut, esoteric kind of stuff. My only big thing to maybe mention before we move on, watch your hand pegs. I have seen a handful, no pun intended, of folks with entire pegs snapped off inside the wrist, and what I noticed on my figure, I didn't really have any issues, it's not a problem, but what I noticed is when I went to move something, everything just sort of like barely moved, so I had to ever so slightly, kind of work those pegs. I didn't have to heat anything up, that wasn't needed, but I did have to take extra care to make sure that the hinges were all moving before I did try to move them within that wrist cavity, that peg hole. So watch out for that. Otherwise though, ton of options, tons of different things you can do to change up your putty into various types from various things. So overall, there's a lot to like with these guys. If you like the Green Ranger figure, just based on articulation and how he's put together, you're gonna like the putty just fine. It moves well. Again, definitely moves well within the confines of Ultimates. Looks really good. I love the paintwork on the gloves, the gauntlets, the mask, that red eye mask in particular. And then really the name of the game about this figure is accessories. You get a ton of stuff, and I went into this one really not caring about any of them because I'm still probably always going to display them as normal putties, but this stuff is really fun. The football jersey is ridiculous. I love the ability to have them be Z putties as well, so there's a lot of customization and just a lot of ways to make different kinds of putties with these guys. So that's going to do it for this look at the Super 7 Ultimates Power Rangers Wave 1 Putty Patroller. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.